Chapter 1340. The sky was a dazzling blue, and the winds howled for thousands of miles, as if lamenting the end of the child of destiny. An eagle's cry tore through the sky. At some point, a male eagle circled in the sunlight. Chuolong's heart was dead, and he no longer argued with Qian Rongji. That would only make his defeat even more humiliating. His pride did not allow him to do that. But was this the end? He could not accept it. He could not accept it no matter what. In terms of true strength, no one here could take a single blow from him. Even if everyone here worked together, they would not be a match for him. But he had lost, and it was a crushing defeat. It was like a nightmare that he could not wake up from. Unifying the world and moving unhindered through the 9 provinces was like a dream. The hatred brewed from thousands of negative emotions was like a poisonous snake biting at his soul. The one he hated the most was not Li Qingshan, Little, or even Qian Rongji, but Sumi Rao, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. If she had not caused him to suffer chi deviation, he would not have ended up like this. That should have been the peak of his life, but he had fallen into a bottomless abyss beyond redemption. From love to hatred, being defeated and killed by the enemy was simply because he was not as skilled. He could calmly accept such an ending. Or rather, he had already realized this from the moment he stepped onto the path of cultivation. But he was betrayed by the woman he loved the most and lost to an opponent weaker than him. He could not accept it no matter what. His aura was extremely chaotic, and he almost lost control of himself. His chi deviation caused layers of illusions to appear before his eyes. Fragments of the distant past almost reversed his entire life. If he was not the child of destiny, he would have exploded and died before anyone could kill him. The tip of the sword hovered in the air, not falling for a long time. Why? Qian Rongji opened her eyes. Because you are the child of destiny. Killing you will cause a backlash. Little unsheathed the Buddha slaying sword. He stated his reason. With a wave of his sleeve, the forsaken immortal sword flew back into his hand. He gently caressed the blade. It had almost been refined by Chuolong, and even the sword spirit was completely suppressed. Is that so? Qian Rongji muttered to herself, and a will to live suddenly arose in her heart. She strongly suspected that this was due to the influence of the dragon. But was there any other way out? She was both Qian Rongji and human Emperor Feng. Long, Little, and Li Qingshan threw himself at her and held her tightly in his arms. Smelling the faint scent of sandalwood in her hair, he had a surreal feeling of being reborn, as if he had returned to the time when he first came to this world. Qingshan. Little and smiled faintly, like ripples in a quiet pond. Li Qingshan calmed down and reprimanded, "Who allowed you to do this?" "Anyway, it's not you," Little, and stuck out his tongue. Li Qingshan was speechless at first, but then his heart ached. His expression was as if all the injuries on his body were acting up at once. Suddenly, he felt that Qian Rongji or Zhuolong's gaze was like a venomous snake coiling around him, making him feel uncomfortable. If it were not for the fact that he did not want to bite the hand that fed him, he would be tempted to end it right here and now. However, she believed that Little and would definitely have thought things through, so she cast a questioning gaze at him. Little and said, "Qingshan, there's a place I want to go." "Where to?" "The Lingua Temple." The Lingua Temple of the past had now become the largest demon cavern in the 9 provinces. Black demon chi surged into the clouds like a never-ending smoke signal. Dark clouds blanketed the sky and earth. The land within a radius of 500 kilometers had been polluted, and all living beings had been demonized. It became extraordinarily twisted and violent. The demon cavern was surprisingly peaceful. Now that the demon caverns of the world were open and unguarded, This was the best situation they had ever encountered since the demon domain began invading the 9 provinces. However, whenever Little and opened up a demon cavern, he would go on a killing spree. Even after he opened up the demon cavern, no demon folk dared to emerge. Only after a while did they dare to send out scouts. They secretly investigated the situation of the 9 provinces, but the ghost tower had greatly affected the demon folks' determination to invade. The demon domain was vast, but it was still not enough to steal food from the hungry ghost realm. If the herbivores invading the demon domain could be described as constantly chewing and ruminating, only then could they digest it. Then the hungry ghost realm was a naked carnivore, tearing apart flesh and gulping it down. Later on, the Hui dragon descended from the sky along the heaven-climbing vine, causing the situation of the 9 states to become even more complicated and confusing. The terrifying auras that erupted from the battles that surpassed the limits of the 3rd heavenly tribulation caused the demon kings who were investigating to tremble. They advised the demon emperor several times to give up on invading this world. However, the demon emperor remained silent. He had other plans. When Li Qingshan's group arrived before the demon cavern, the scouting demon king had fled back into the demon domain a long time ago. Gazing at the unfathomable demon cavern, Li Qingshan recalled what Luo Ho Xiaoming had said. He already understood what Little and wanted to do. Why? Qian Rongji gazed at the forsaken immortal sword in her hand and asked again. Little, and did not answer this question. All she said was, "Go." Qian Rongji gazed at her face and turned around to make her way into the demon cavern. Her figure gradually blurred until she arrived at the edge of the demon cavern. She glanced back again before leaping into the demon cavern, vanishing into the surging demon chi. They constantly fell into the dark abyss. The hearts of all living beings and the will of the heavens were gradually stripped from their bodies. Either he or she was no longer the child of destiny of the 9 provinces. Even if they wanted to turn back, it was impossible. Afterwards, the skull prayer beads flew away. In the end, only the 3 burial robes remained, which gradually peeled off from their bodies. Just as Li Qingshan's group was about to leave, a hysterical dragon's roar suddenly rang out in the demon cavern. It was not just expressing bone-deep hatred, but also the ecstasy of escaping or just chi deviation. Little and asked with uncertainty, "Did I do anything wrong?" Li Qingshan shrugged. Who cares? The 9 cauldrons had already shattered. Once they left the 9 provinces, the Huolong would no longer be the child of destiny. It was impossible for him to return. He even hoped that the Huolong could devour Qian Rongji and return to him one day. He exchanged glances with Luo Ho Xiaoming. Their eyes shone with the same light. Even though there was a difference of 2 major realms of cultivation, the feeling of being smashed to pieces still did not feel too good. If there was an opportunity for revenge, then it would be for the best. Who do you think will win? That's hard to say. You've already witnessed the power of the Yang soul, and that woman will probably become the child of destiny of the demon domain. The will of the heavens. The will of the heavens. There really is always a way out. Is it really that easy to become the child of destiny? Aren't all demon folk vicious and evil? They're just a bunch of pitiful worms under the control of demon hearts. They'll completely demonify into wild beasts from the slightest carelessness, constantly sucking up to the heavens in hopes of receiving even more charity. They're just hypocrites. Luo Ho Xiaoming was very disdainful of demon folk. After all, the Azura realm was a benevolent path among the 6 realms of Sasra. However, probably only the 12 demon gods could match up to the evil he had committed. Hypocrites. This was the first time Li Qingshan had heard of this term, but when he thought about the customs of a place like the demon domain, he could not help but laugh. calling people hypocrites in the demon domain was definitely an insult. He could use it when he arrived in the demon domain in the future. He still had a wager in the demon domain. He had to abide by the ancient, bloody oath and venture into the depths of the evil demon domain to challenge the undefeatable demon gods. Just the thought of it made his blood boil. At this moment, a charming, unpredictable voice suddenly rang out. "Oh my, I didn't think you'd actually get away with it." "Then let me calculate how much time you have left." Li Qingshan frowned. "Su Minrao." Su Minrao raised her chin and smiled. "If you want to escape from Qiongqi, then kneel and beg me." How could she not sense demon god Qiongqi's arrival in the 9 provinces in the past? She had also investigated the contents of the Nether River Blood Oath. Luo Ho Xiaoming said in surprise, "Demon god Qiongqi?" Li Qingshan stared at Su Minrao closely as he explained everything to his important ally, Luo Ho Xiaoming. Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes widened. He cried out involuntarily, "The Nether River Blood Oath! And a promise of 500 years. Do you know that 500 years is a trap? In a world like that, it's impossible for your cultivation to advance. It'll be pointless even if you stay for another 5,000 years. And even if you really do have 500 years, Qiongqi is a true demon that has undergone 7 heavenly tribulations. He's one of the few in the 3,000 realms of Sasra. You'd better go to the demon domain to fight Qingqi Mountain. There, even the Zhenwu demon-rinsing patriarch of the desireless heavenly palace can't do anything to him." Li Qingshan spread his hands. "What can I do? Who asked me to be so charming that Qiongqi wants me to be the 2nd strongest in Qingqi Mountain? If I go to the demon domain, I might also be the child of destiny. I would have already led an army to conquer the 9 provinces. Why would I need to fight Chuolong?" Chapter 411, Possessed by the Devil. Chapter 1341. Luo Ho Xiaoming did not know whether to admire his courage or to sigh that the ignorant were fearless. He was only a 3rd stage heavenly tribulation cultivator. The difference between him and the 7th stage heavenly tribulation true demon Qiongqi was like heaven and earth. When an ant fought with a human, there would always be a chance to take a bite, even if it would be crushed to death. It was impossible for Li Qingshan to bite Qiongqi even if he risked his life. However, Qiongqi's favor towards Li Qingshan was not strange at all, because from the perspective of a cultivator, this guy was too strange. His words and actions were completely different from others. "You have a way to remove the river Styx blood oath." This was the only explanation, because even if she immediately returned to the Azura realm to cultivate, she would not be able to defeat Qiongqi in such a short time. However, it was not that there was no way to remove the river Styx blood oath, but it was definitely not something she could do. Su Minrao sneered. "If I had a way to remove the river Styx blood oath, why would I be grinding my teeth with you here?" She played with her hair with her fingertips. "But I do have a way. Although I cannot guarantee success, it is better than death, and it is related to a huge secret. Li Qingshan, with your conduct, when you reach the demon realm, you probably won't even be able to reach Qingqi Mountain, let alone defeat Qiongqi. I will ask you again, are you going to kneel or not?" Li Qingshan lowered his head and slightly closed his eyes. He stood there motionlessly, as if he was pondering. Su Minrao stood with her umbrella, her clothes fluttering in the wind. In the surging demon chi, she looked like a radiant goddess, while Li Qingshan was the lowly disciple waiting for redemption. Time ticked by. Su Minrao was getting impatient. She turned her neck slightly and said, "Hey, have you made up your mind? I don't have time to waste with you." Littlein said, "Don't disturb him, he's asleep." "What?" Su Minrao took a closer look. Li Qingshan's eyes were closed, and his breathing was deep. Sure enough, he had fallen asleep. In this battle, Li Qingshan had almost crossed two major realms. This was simply unbelievable in the cultivation world. No matter how fast Gu Yennying's speed was, no matter how powerful Luo Ho Xiaoming's bloodline was, no matter how many magical weapons Little and had, no matter how insidious and cunning Qian Rongji was, if it weren't for Li Qingshan, they wouldn't have been able to do anything. In the face of absolute power, any strategy would be futile. Li Qingshan was like a mountain, silently shouldering the majority of the pressure and maintaining the strategic offensive against Hui Long. Of course, since he cultivated the 9 transformations of demons and gods, his strength was not limited to that of a demon king. Moreover, Chuo Long was restricted by the laws of heaven and earth, so he could not unleash the power of a human sovereign. That was how such a miracle was created. Even so, this battle was also extremely difficult and dangerous. The charm of the 9-tailed demon fox, the invincible enemy, and the threat of heavens will all required him to focus and fight to the end. It was like walking on a tightrope on a cliff, one careless step, and he would be smashed to pieces. His stamina had already been drained, so as soon as the outcome of the battle was decided, fatigue immediately washed over him. With the support of his divine earth force, he could still stand stably here, basically standing until the very last moment. As for Su Minreo's conditions, he didn't even think about it for a second, because someone once told him, "Don't lower your head to anyone," and he deeply believed it, not even willing to lower his head, not to mention kneeling. Perhaps he really couldn't escape from the battle at Mount Qingqi, but he could be killed, but he couldn't be scared to death. He had to eat and sleep. "Mi Rao, you've miscalculated again." Gu Yennying opened her fan and smiled. Luo Ho Xiaoming proudly replied, "He's just another undefeatable enemy. He's not enough to make Li Qingshan so afraid that he can't sleep." A hint of anger flashed in Su Minreo's eyes. She felt like she was acting like an idiot just now. She gripped the handle of her umbrella tightly, wishing she could kill Li Qingshan right there and then. She didn't really intend to make Li Qingshan kneel. She just couldn't help but get back at him. As long as Li Qingshan gave in and gave her a way out, she could naturally fulfill the oath and help him. She didn't expect him to not give her any face at all. However, if Li Qingshan really gave in, she would probably take things one step further. The path of charm was always about taking a mile when given an inch, and she wasn't the type to take enough advantage of others. Just as she was about to leave, she vaguely saw a long, silent river meandering in the void, surpassing time and space, unable to be judged by the concept of length or width. It was the legendary river Styx. She gritted her teeth and had no choice but to stop. Since they had already met, the oath had officially begun. She had to assume the role of a guide and give Li Qingshan the correct guidance. Otherwise, she would be breaking the oath and falling into the river Styx forever. In a trance, she seemed to see a gentle smile. A pair of green eyes looked at her from above. "Mi Rao, you should just accept your fate." "Can I kneel and beg you?" Little Anne asked, her face expressionless. Her eyes were empty and deep, as if she could see through Su Minreo's inner struggle. Stare. Su Minrao felt that the way she looked at her was no different from looking at a block of wood. Other than angering Li Qingshan, what else could she gain from her kowtow? Even if she did not feel humiliated at all, Li Qingshan would definitely fly into a rage and become even less likely to be charmed. It would even affect the process of the oath. This had to be one of her damned schemes. She said word by word, "You can't." "Oh." Su Minrao took a deep breath to suppress her anger. "Tell this bastard to find me when he wakes up." She turned around and disappeared. Looks like she really does know something. Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes shone brightly. Just what was the method to defeat a god? If he stood with this guy, he would never have to worry about not having a fight. Hey, wake up! Gu Yenying tapped Li Qingshan's forehead with her fan, and Li Qingshan collapsed on the ground. She looked at his sleeping face and shook her head with a smile. We'll talk about everything when he wakes up. When the Kuan Peng spread its wings and took off again, Little and gazed back at the depths of the demon cavern. I hope there'll be a day when you can tell me that the path of white bones is wrong. Even the people who suffer in the sea of bitterness of the Hua family, the people who would rather not exist, have their own value and reasons for their existence. The demon domain, under the illumination of a black sun, the camps stretched for thousands of kilometers on a plain of black soil. It was extremely noisy, filled with evil, twisted demon folk and colossal, vicious demonic beasts. On the surface, the two often seemed the same. The sky was densely packed with demon caverns, like empty eye sockets. Every single one of them led to the same world, the 9 provinces. However, this target had already been abandoned. The army was currently retreating from this region, preparing to set off for a new battlefield and invade another world. What's that? Suddenly, a demon folk raised his head and discovered a figure as tiny as a mustard seed had descended from the largest demon cavern in the sky. If he took a closer look, he would discover that the figure was currently pulling on itself, constantly twisting. The black sun seemed to brighten. In that instant, the surroundings changed color. Demon chi whistled and surged, gathering into surging demonic clouds that surged and swirled into a great swirl. At the center of the swirl was the twisted figure. The surroundings fell silent. All the demon folk held their breaths, gazing at the phenomenon in the sky. A single word appeared in their minds: demon seed. This was what demon folk referred to as children of destiny, who had gained the favor of the demon domain. It represented unparalleled talent and strength. The fervent atmosphere swept through like a fierce gale, making the eyes of all the demon folk light up with greed. Even the chaotic, foolish demonic beasts began to pant. They instinctively wanted to devour the demon seed that was about to form. In any world, becoming a child of destiny meant receiving the protection of the heavens. If anyone was bold enough to kill a child of destiny, they would suffer an intense backlash. In a world with a powerful will of the world, a backlash like that could even be fatal. It was equivalent to the death of their beloved son. They would obviously be furious and want revenge. However, that was not the case in the demon domain. Not only would killing a demon seed not lead to any backlash, but it could even steal the will of the heavens instead, granting them tremendous benefits. Not to mention that demon seeds were the best pills and medicines in the demon domain. Devouring the most ordinary, weak demon seed was enough for their demon heart to undergo a qualitative change. As a result, whenever a demon seed was born, it would lead to intense slaughter and conflict. Many demon seeds would die prematurely as soon as they were born. It was like a vicious stepmother, purposefully giving the most fun toy to the child she hated the most, leading to a fight between the other children. This was the demon domain. Even the obscure will of heaven was filled with distortion and evil. To be continued. Chapter 412, Blood Oath Demon Seed. Chapter 1342. This is a middle-aged man in short, brown, hemp garments, and a beard made his way out of the tent that was as grand as a palace. He gazed at the sky in surprise. It was not like he had never seen a demon seed being born before, but he had never heard of one that could cause such a tremendous phenomenon. The demon domain was boundless, far beyond what the 9 provinces could rival. If the 9 provinces were compared to a small lake, then the demon domain would be the vast ocean. A small lake could not nurture a large fish, but the ocean could accommodate dragons. Its twisted, evil will permeated every speck of dust. Perhaps it was no different from the will of the world of the 9 provinces in nature. However, When the small lake rippled slightly, the ocean churned violently, and the ocean flowed for thousands of kilometers. Even true dragons could not go against the flow. If they could go with the flow, they would receive endless assistance. This was exactly what it meant to borrow the strength of the world when the time came. There were as many demon seeds as there were carps in the river throughout history. There were differences in quality among them. The purer it was, the greater the temptation. He hated this feeling of being out of control, which was why he did not take off on his sword and devour the demon seed. However, he hated the throbbing in the depths of his heart even more. He felt like the demon seed was filled with disaster and misfortune. Regular demon folk were unable to resist this temptation, let alone the brainless demonic beasts. A strange bird unfurled its bluish-black bat wings and kicked up a fierce gust of wind, sending all the demon folk within 3 meters into the air. Caw! A sharp, ear-piercing howl sounded like the bugle call for a charge. Several 100,000 demon folk flew towards the demon seed. In that moment, they shrouded the sky and filled the air with a ruckus. The man's gaze was as sharp as a sword as he stood there without moving. Even as the commander of this army, he was unable to stop this revelry. As far as the eye could see, the demon kings under his command all remained on the sidelines. They did not act recklessly. At the same time, they remained cautious of one another. In the end, their gazes all gathered on him. No one could steal the demon seed from him. "Sir Demon Emperor, what do we do?" "Wait." In the depths of the vortex, a male and female voice argued intensely. The two wills clashed desperately. "Bitch, piss off." The man roared as he resisted the will of heaven. With his masculine power, he gained the absolute upper hand. He, trash, loser, cuckold." The woman laughed crazily and spat out the words one by one, directly hitting the man's weak spot. All women in the world deserve to die. The man's inner demons danced chaotically, and he flew into a rage. He wanted nothing more than to perish together with her. "Oh, how sad your mother will be." But the woman never regarded death as a threat. She laughed at the man's incompetence even more wantonly. It was like an eternal struggle between men and women, rationality and emotion, masculinity and femininity. No matter how strong a man was, he would never be able to completely conquer a weak woman. Just like how rationality could never erase emotions, because a woman's body was pregnant with the heavenly Tao, the body of the true dragon, which was a mixture of the flesh and blood of many grand cultivators and demon kings, bobbed up and down in the swirl like a child that was left aside and ignored, although it was the cause of the dispute. Therefore, it grew up without restraint, and demonic energy surged into it. It expanded 1,000 times and turned into a golden-scaled snake with a pair of dragon eyes. It twisted its body violently as if it had gone mad. The demon emperor's heart tightened. A colossal body, like that, definitely would not be easy to deal with. The demon kings even began to consider retreating. They had basically given up on the idea of devouring the demon seed. The huge snake devoured all the demon chi in the air, and its colossal body fell straight towards the ground. It smashed into the mountainous demon folk army, at first before landing heavily with a great rumble. Countless demon folk were smashed to pulp. However, even more demon folk surged over, swallowing the huge snake in a black mass. Looking down from above, it seemed like a group of ants trying to divide and devour a dead snake. Rumble! The huge snake rolled its body, grinding through the ground again and again. Crack! Crack! Its bones shattered. Spurt! Spurt! Flesh and blood sprayed everywhere. The sounds mixed together, enough to make people shiver in fear and feel their scalps tingle. In the blink of an eye, It had turned the ground into a swamp of flesh and blood. It was filled with mangled flesh and severed limbs. The smell of blood rose into the air. However, the frenzied atmosphere did not stop. Instead, it rose even higher. The demon folk lunged towards the huge snake wave after wave. Most of those who were crushed to pulp were regular demon folk, while the thousands of demon commanders and demon emperors flew through the air agilely like winged soldier ants, allowing the demon folk to deplete the snake's power. Gradually, the huge snake stopped wriggling as if it had used up all of its strength in its struggle. It lay on the ground like a dead snake, allowing the ants to swallow it. The golden scales were indestructible, but they could not stop the claws and teeth of so many demon folk. They were ripped apart bit by bit. The demon folk tasted the sweet, delicious flesh and blood of the true dragon. The mysterious power of the demon seed within it made them even more spirited and more zealous. That's it. The demon emperor was stunned. This was basically worse than a regular wild beast. It was a complete waste of such terrifying power. For some reason, he had a feeling that the huge snake was not struggling against the demon folk. Instead, it was fighting against an invisible enemy. Just what had happened to the 9 provinces. He could not help but glance at the demon cavern in the sky, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. He saw a strange, twisted sword hovering right below the black demon cavern. He cried out involuntarily, "The obedient sword!" Originally, he saw how the huge snake had stopped struggling and was about to go fight over the demon seed, but he could no longer care about anything else now. He immediately formed a seal with his hand, and with a thunk, the sword on his back flew out of its sheath. Afterwards, he took off on his sword, shooting towards the sword as a violet streak of light. He glanced at the ground from the corner of his eye, only to see the demon kings lunging towards the huge snake from all directions, killing and scattering all the demon folk who stood in their way. They feasted on the snake's body. In order to devour even faster, they directly demonified. He snorted coldly inside, "I'll let you eat some flesh and blood for now. If you're bold enough to devour the demon seed, then you're just looking to die." To him, the obedient sword was even more important than the demon seed. It was the greatest reason why he had given up on cultivation and personally presided over the invasion of the 9 provinces. As he rapidly drew closer, he gripped the other sword on his waist cautiously. He still had to be wary of the obedient sword, soul inside. However, even when he gripped the hilt, the obedient sword did not budge at all. He could not help but laugh. Truly, one can wear out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it effortlessly by chance. Once I go collect the demon seed again, my gains will definitely be no less than conquering the 9 provinces. At this moment, miserable cries rang out from below. To his shock, he discovered that the cries were actually coming from the demon kings under his command. These demon kings were all extremely vicious, who knew how many battles they had gone through to reach their current level. They had basically become numb to pain. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he basically would have struggled to believe just what kind of pain could make them cry out like that. It was like they had fallen into hell. Chapter 1343. The demon folk covered in snakes all fell down, rotting and festering in the air. They fell into the swamp of flesh and blood, kicking up wisps of smoke that wriggled like snakes. Dark red, orange, indigo, dark green. Countless colors spread out in the swamp of flesh and blood, weaving and merging with one another, constantly changing and changing. It was an indescribably beautiful sight. Clouds of smoke and miasma rose up from the ground, and the air was filled with a sweet smell. Even the demon folk who had failed to gather over in the first place collapsed in the smell, becoming a part of it in the end. The demon emperor was stunned. He immediately realized that the flesh and blood of the huge snake was venomous. The demon kings gripped their throats firmly, using their sharp claws to rip at their organs in an attempt to force out the venom. However, smoke snakes slithered out from the gaping wounds, wrapping around them slowly. The demon kings collapsed one by one, rotting into mud. Thousands of smoke snakes merged with the miasma. The army of several million demon folk had been completely annihilated. Only their commander remained. The demon emperor suppressed it with all his might. The trembling in his hand became more and more violent. No, wrong. It made the unyielding sword's heart throb more and more violently. A bitter taste filled its mouth, the taste of fear. The snake's eyes lit up, shining with golden light like the eyes of a dragon. It opened its abyss-like mouth and sucked in deeply. The miasma surged in. It constantly twisted its mangled body, producing dense scales. Every single scale was a different color, and they constantly changed, reflecting off the mottled miasma. A pair of sharp horns extended from the snake's head, rapidly unfurling and branching like the antlers of a deer. The flame-like mane extended from its back to its tail, for sharp claws extended from the snake's body, supporting its colossal body. It raised its head and roared at the sky. A violent aura swept out for thousands of kilometers, filled with fury and reluctance. The Demon King, the unyielding sword, almost flew out of his hand. The Demon Emperor discovered that a woman's face had appeared above the dragon's head. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and smiled mysteriously. The demon dragon took off into the air. He rode off on his sword without the slightest hesitation, even though he was in the demon domain. The Demon King could be regarded as an important figure, but how could someone from the 9 states have such a cultivation base? Although the demonic seed could greatly increase one's cultivation, it could not allow one to jump 2 major realms in one go. Moreover, there would definitely be heavenly tribulations during this process, unless the person's strength was already at the 5th heavenly tribulation. Dragon, human emperor, 9 regions. Could it be? Looking back, under the illumination of the black sun, the world was empty, and the army tents rose and fell continuously. Dead silence. That swamp of flesh and blood had evaporated completely, devoured by the giant dragon. At this moment, even the colorful dragon had disappeared. Just now, everything was like a nightmare. Sikon, hide your sword. A voice suddenly sounded in front of him. Startled, he slowly turned his head, only to see the colorful lights in the void receding, revealing a handsome man with a dignified appearance. She had a slender figure and long limbs. There was a diamond-shaped gem embedded in her forehead. 7 colors circulated within it, adding a bit of mystery to her appearance. She was currently staring at him coldly. "You are Nightmare Dragon." Kuan Peng circled above the 9 provinces again and again, staring at the ground with its eagle eyes that were as sharp as swords. Even as graceful as she was, her heart was extremely heavy right now. Smoke rose into the sky from the surroundings of the 9 provinces. That was demon chi that constantly surged out of the demon caverns. The vile aura contaminated millions of lands. Millions of lives had been demonized. If these demon caverns were not sealed up, this world would become a demon domain sooner or later, even if demon folk did not invade. However, that was nothing compared to the true threat. Gazing at the boundary between the Green Province and the Mist Province, the maw of hungry ghosts had already become an abyss that stretched over 1,000 kilometers, and it was constantly ripping apart. Everything in the surroundings was falling in. The demon domain was terrifying, but it did not possess the ability to devour worlds. As long as all the demon caverns were suppressed, there would be a day when all the scars would be healed and the contaminated land would be purified. It was impossible to seal up such a colossal maw of hungry ghosts. The laws of death had already begun distorting this world, devouring it faster and faster. The destruction of the world of the 9 provinces was only a matter of time. She sighed and flapped her wings, flying thousands of kilometers away and landing in a pure white city in the surging sea of clouds. A pair of eyes opened quietly. They were scarlet red like fire, magnificent and resplendent. Li Qingshan discovered that he was lying on the surface of the water. Milky white light rippled around him as white wings wrapped around him. The handsome faces were mixed with a mixture of respect and fear. When he glanced past them, they all shifted their gazes away, afraid to meet his eyes. He murmured, "I really feel like I've ascended to heaven." The feathered people looked at one another. They had no idea what he meant. "First Father, you're awake." Li Fengyuan made his way over in surprise and joy. "Where is this?" Li Qingshan yawned. He felt a sense of relief from exhaustion. "This is the holy land of the feathered people. Who knows how many years this pool of Holy Spirit fluid has been accumulated? Just healing you used up half of it." "Ha! So much for getting them to agree. If it wasn't bathwater, I would have drunk the remaining half of the pool." Hearing the words bathwater, the feathered people's expressions turned ugly. However, they had objected to Li Fengyuan bringing the city amongst the clouds to participate in the war. They were afraid that Li Qingshan would settle the score with them later, so they didn't care about the Holy Land anymore. That day, Li Fengyuan, the king of cooking meat, wanted to help the First Father. However, after personally witnessing the level of the war, he realized that he was just a stopgap member of the For Heavenly Kings. Not only could he not be of much help, but he might also need Li Qingshan's protection. If he was accidentally captured as a hostage, he would be more of a hindrance than a help. Thus, he wisely chose to watch from afar. When it came to the decisive battle on Dragon Head Mountain, outsiders were not allowed to interfere. Finally, the First Father obtained the final victory. He could only continue to do his logistics work and heal Li Qingshan's injuries with the Phoenix Fire. The effect was very obvious. If we're going to drink, we're going to drink. I'm already prepared. I hope that the First Father can defeat Hui Long and unify the 9 provinces. Li Qingshan laughed out loud. Then we'll have to find a few beautiful winged human chicks to drink with us. The expressions of all the winged humans darkened, but they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. So be it. A female winged human stole a glance and thought, "It's not really shameful to drink with him. I'll sacrifice myself for the winged human race." With a bang, the door opened. Gu Yening walked in and said with a smile, "It's just that how can the chicks of the winged human race be worthy of Uncle Li? In my opinion, the 7 great foreign human races should each send a few chicks and have a banquet on Dragon Head Mountain for 3 days and 3 nights. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "Good idea. When the time comes, I'll have Yening perform a dance for me." Smack! Before he finished speaking, he suffered a blow to the head. Gu Yening sat diagonally at the side of the pool and waved her folding fan lightly. She smiled and asked, "Are you satisfied with this song?" Li Qingshan shook his head. "All right, we'll talk about the celebration later. Let me deal with the matter of the hungry ghost realm first, as well as those demon dens." Gu Yening was surprised. "You still remember?" Li Qingshan yawned and stretched. "I've always wanted to save the world. Unfortunately, it's already too late." Gu Yening sighed slightly, but her expression turned resolute again. "There's no time to celebrate. We have to leave the 9 provinces as soon as possible." Chapter 4:14, Dragon Transformation, Destruction. Chapter 13:44. Li Qingshan frowned and asked, "Why Gu Yenying told him everything she had seen and heard, which made his frown deepen and deepen. The feathered people present paled in fright. If the nest was destroyed, no eggs would remain intact. If the world of the 9 provinces was destroyed, they could only go to the hungry ghost realm or the demon domain. Either one would be a choice worse than death for them, and those living beings didn't even have such a choice. Li Qingshan pondered for a long time and asked, "Is it my fault?" Gu Yenying shook her head. "The path exists, the heart goes, there is no other choice." Li Qingshan smiled and said, "This is not your character. Why? Are you afraid of embarrassing me? Even if there are thousands of reasons, I can't absolve myself from the blame. It's really not easy to be a hero. Before I leave, let me do my best." With a splash, he jumped out of the pool, and the milky white spiritual liquid rolled down his bronze-colored body. He was naked, and he walked out of the door like a statue. No fault. Li Fengyuan gave him the clothes he had prepared. Li Qingshan shook off the red clothes and put them on. He tightened the belt and asked, "Where's little N?" "He seems to be digging up the bones." Big Wheel Temple of Lijiao. A white hand stroked the prayer wheel, and the whirring sound passed through the dark corridor. Turning a corner, the sunset dyed the palace built against the mountain red. It was quiet and glorious, and the chanting sound came from afar. Arriving at the main entrance of the hall, her white bare feet stepped over the high threshold. Thousands of monks were sitting neatly in the vast hall. The chanting sound was continuous, but it suddenly quieted down. The long-browed old monk sitting on the high platform said in a deep voice, "Amitabha, the sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent, and you will be saved." His voice shook the house. It was deafening like thunder. Thousands of monks said together, "The sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent, and you will be saved." Many pairs of eyes were attracted by the white ghost-like figure, and their voices were not as powerful and decisive as the old monks. She seemed not to hear it, and walked past the monks to the high platform. Ja, the long-browed old monk, straightened his back. His shriveled body suddenly swelled up and tightened the scarlet kasaya. There were 3 monks on his left and right, all of them looking angry. The 7 great monk kings of the Big Wheel Temple were ready to strike. Their aura was like a prison or an ocean rushing toward her. She acted as if she didn't hear any of this. Step by step, she walked to the front of the high platform. The battle was about to begin, but she walked around the side of the platform. From the beginning to the end, he did not even look at the long-browed old monk. Except for her, all the monks looked at the old monk. The veins on the old monk's forehead were popping out. He clenched his fists tightly, like a vajra glaring at them. He was about to protect them and subdue the demon. The moment she brushed past him, she suddenly deflated and sat back down on the platform. She came to the back of the hall and cut open a stone door with her sword, entering the deep underground palace. In the hall of great strength, a monk king said, "Abbot, the enemies of the Buddha have invaded the relic palace. Quickly activate the rotation formation. How can you blaspheme the corporeal body relics of our predecessors?" The long-browed old monk retorted, "So what if we activate the formation?" For a moment, the crowd in the hall was stirred up. "We will fight the enemy of Buddha. We swear to live and die with Big Wheel Temple. Let her know that Big Wheel Temple is not a place where she can come and go as she pleases." The long-browed old monk said again, "We can fight with her, but what if Li Qingshan comes?" All the monks were silent. Most of them had not seen Li Qingshan with their own eyes, so they did not know much about the cause and effect of the battle on Mount Dragon Head. However, the ending of the Lingua Temple was known by everyone, and it shocked all the Buddhist disciples in the world. It rose from the mountain and crossed thousands of miles. It was thrown in front of Mount Dragonhead. Such power was unimaginable, making people lose the courage to fight against it. The long-browed old monk put his palms together and closed his eyes. Let's leave it to fate. She had already come to the depths of the underground palace, right below the Hall of Great Strength. The belly of the mountain was hollowed out, and a 9-story building was built. Dried corpses were sitting there, and they were the corporeal body relics left by the previous eminent monks. Because they worshipped the Chakravarti Saint King, if they had no hope of ascending, they would reincarnate with a bit of their real spirits, so they kept a lot of corporeal body relics. She shook her hand, and the 3-burial robe floated up, wrapping around a dried corpse. She recited the 3-burial scripture, and lines of blasphemous scriptures flowed on the 3-burial robe. The eyes of the dried corpse blinked, and its skin turned from yellow to white. Its sunken cheeks gradually became rosy, and it looked no different from a living person. It stood up and knelt in front of her, putting its palms together. Honored Master. The 3-burial robe. The living dead, flesh and bones, reincarnating the dead and converting people to the path of bones. In a moment, the dried corpses stood up one after another. There were men and women among them. And regardless of their age and appearance when they died, they all returned to the appearance of their prime. All of them were youthful and full of vitality, and their eyes shone with a bright luster. They were different from the skeletal demons formed by the skull prayer beads and the skeletal ghost king in the Blood Sea banner. They all had the power and wisdom of their previous lives, but they were converted by her and became her disciples. Those who could place the corporeal body relics here were all the eminent monks of the Big Wheel Temple. It could be said that if she walked out now, she could build a holy land of Buddhism that did not belong to the Lingua Temple. A monk stepped forward. Honored Master, the current abbot of the Big Wheel Temple was originally my disciple. I'm willing to go up and discuss Dharma with him so that he can break the cycle of reincarnation and convert to the sect. What if he doesn't obey? Then we can only grant him nirvana, and then ask the honored master to convert him. The eminent monks walked out of the underground palace, and not long after, the Big Wheel Temple converted. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows slightly. Sometimes he really did not understand what this child was doing, and it made him sigh. The little An who had doubts and asked him for guidance on the path of bones was gone forever. What about little Ming? Gu Yenying said he's trying to control the sky climbing vine at the Dragonhead Mountain and let it communicate with the Azura path. Li Qingshan nodded. All he lacks is resources. If he succeeds, I'm afraid he'll be able to pass the 4th heavenly tribulation very soon. We can also follow the sky climbing vine and go to the Azura path if we wanted, the demonic beast path if we want to, and if we want to. His voice gradually slowed down, and an idea appeared in his mind, but it was erratic, vague, and difficult to grasp. He could not help but fall into deep thought. Suddenly, he had an idea. Wait, I have a good idea. If we succeed, we can not only save the world, but it will also be of great benefit to us. We can do what Chualong wanted to do, but failed to do. Gu Yenying's eyes flashed. You mean, let's go, we'll talk about it, at the Dragonhead Mountain. The Kuanping rose with the wind, and Gu Yenying said to Li Qingshan on her back, Aren't your injuries all healed? Why don't you fly over yourself? The situation is so urgent. Aren't you fast? As the saying goes, capable people do more work. Also, please be polite to the hero, who is about to save the world. Li Qingshan spread his legs and stood on the Kuanping's back like a thorn. Do you know that you can be really annoying sometimes? We've arrived at the Dragonhead Mountain. Hurry up and get off. Gu Yenying rolled her eyes, and the Kuanping went around the sky climbing vine that connected the sky and the earth and slowly landed on the Dragonhead Mountain. To be continued. P.S. Those who voted are all good people. Great people. Chapter 4:15. Convert save the world. Chapter 1345. A sky-climbing vine suddenly pierced through the void and stabbed at Kuan Peng. Gu Yenying dodged the attack elegantly, but more sky-climbing vines pierced through the void, forcing her to retract her wings and land in front of Dragon Head Mountain instead. Luo Ho Xiaoming was standing on a steep rock at the foot of the mountain. Li Qingshan jumped down and landed on a rock not far away. Even though he knew that he hadn't finished it, he couldn't help but ask, "How is it?" Luo Ho Xiaoming pursed his lips and shook his head slightly. "No." "Hey, you're a god. How can you say no?" Luo Ho Xiaoming puffed out his chest and raised his head. "I'm a god of war, not a gardener. This sky-climbing vine isn't even 1,000 years old. It's only grown to this size because of excessive enthusiasm. It hasn't formed any spiritual consciousness at all, let alone become a spiritual monster. With our cultivation, it's easy to destroy it, but it's almost impossible to control it." Li Qingshan knew that plant spiritual monsters were famous for their long lifespans, but their growth was also extremely slow. The more exotic a plant was, the more difficult it was to become a spiritual monster. It often took a long time to form spiritual consciousness, but it was only at the level of a wild beast. After a long time, it would possess intelligence equal to that of a normal human. Otherwise, with so many 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs and towering trees in the world, if it was so easy to become spiritual monsters, the world would be full of plant spirits. In fact, among the 72 demon monarchs, there were only a few plant spirits. If this sky-climbing vine could become a spiritual monster one day, it wouldn't even be considered a child now. It was almost in the embryonic stage, still in a state of chaos. It acted based on instinct, unable to communicate, and wouldn't be threatened or tempted. Li Qingshan was a little unwilling. Then how can Qian Rongji control this sky-climbing vine? That has to be done when this sky-climbing vine is very young, injecting its own consciousness to control it. Otherwise, why do you think Chualong left behind such a huge hidden danger? No matter how much he trusts his fellow disciples, he might as well control this sky-climbing vine himself. That Qian Rongji probably calculated this. To some extent, Suo Long's defeat had a lot to do with this characteristic of the sky-crawling vine. Li Qingshan looked up at the heaven-climbing vines on Dragon Head Mountain. He didn't speak for a long time, and his expression was very disappointed. He wholeheartedly wanted to be the hero who saved the world. But if he couldn't control the heaven-climbing vine, then everything would be over. Am I really not made to be a hero? Gu Yenying was used to seeing him fight to the death. No matter how distressed he was or how dangerous the situation was, he had never shown such an expression. For some reason, he couldn't help but feel sorry for him, so he advised, "Qingshan, let it go." Li Qingshan took a deep breath. "Xiaoming, can I ask you a question?" "Speak." Li Qingshan grinned, but he realized that his smile was a little forced. He exhaled and said seriously, "When you realize what you've done, you'll know that you've done something wrong. How do you feel?" "It shot down the stars, destroyed the world, and slaughtered all living beings." What a grand and magnificent phrase. When he first heard this, his heart was filled with envy, and he longed to possess this kind of inconceivably great power. Other than that, he didn't feel much else. But at this moment, when faced with this situation, even if he wasn't the direct perpetrator, he still felt extremely heavy. He remembered that he had just returned to the 9 states, little and slaughtered billions of living beings in several states, which shocked him greatly. But how could he bear to blame her? He said that he had to bear this sin, but it was just empty words. Now, he suddenly realized that he didn't understand the weight of this sin. This feeling was completely different. Luo Ho Xiaoming closed his eyes, and his face was cold. I don't want to answer. You're really an amazing guy. Li Qingshan praised him sincerely. He thought of the first time he saw him, and how he looked like he had lost his fighting spirit. He really didn't think much of it. He felt that his spirit was not even comparable to that of an ordinary Azura, and it was even worse than his own. But now he understood how powerful he was, because it was actually very easy to get rid of this sense of guilt. He just had to shout, "The world is heartless and treats all living beings like dogs, and treat all living beings like ants." Many cultivators did this, and he could do the same. As the saying went, "It's not me who's wrong, it's the world." He could also push the blame to his mother or even to all living beings. Who asked you to be so weak? This world is the law of the jungle. In both his previous and current lives, Li Qingshan had heard too many such opinions, but he didn't. He chose to bear the sin and became depressed day by day until he died. Even if he was reborn in the fire of karma and no longer suffered from the backlash of karma, this weight wouldn't disappear. Why bother? Luo Ho Xiaoming opened his left eye and glanced at him. Aren't you the same? Yes, me too. Since they didn't want to twist their hearts, invert right and wrong, and didn't want to shirk responsibility, they could only bear it themselves. This was their pride. Two people who treated all living beings like dogs couldn't stay together for too long. Gu Yening clapped her hands. All right, let's stop flattering each other. Boys, when do we set off? Qingshan, you can let Deep Blue Lil Fatty take your female friends from the South Sea away from this world, but we can't help the others. Let me try again. Li Qingshan leaped up and arrived on Dragonhead Mountain. The densely packed sky-climbing vines entangled him, but they were shattered by the pitch-black power of vibration as soon as they came into contact with his body. He arrived in front of the sky-climbing vines. The vines were like a dark blue wall, and he broke through the wall and stepped inside. The vines were hollow, and a winding passageway led to the sky, disappearing into the void. Li Qingshan sat with his legs crossed, and his mind was as calm as still water. He first used the spirit turtle to make predictions, and then used various techniques. After a long while, Li Qingshan's mind gradually became turbulent. All of his techniques had failed, and he laughed self-deprecatingly. I really am a standard hypocrite. Yes, even if he had to choose 100 times, he wouldn't hesitate at all. Even at this moment, he did not feel the slightest bit of regret. For the sake of fulfilling his wish, he would do it even if he had to slaughter everyone with his own hands. This was the stubbornness of the ox demon, the violence of the tiger demon, and the willfulness of the ape demon. However, looking back, when he first embarked on this path, he had wanted to become Neo Juxia. In the end, the sins he had committed were thousands of times more than the bandits of the Black Wind stronghold. Life sure was filled with irony. If he wanted to become a hero king, perhaps he could only achieve it in a place like a small world with absolute strength. No, even in a small world, countless innocent people have died because of him. His emotions surged, and his scarlet hair gradually faded. The flames in his scarlet eyes were extinguished, and his handsome face recovered its original chiseled appearance. His brows were tightly furrowed, and he was unable to smile or let go. This unparalleled demon king, who dominated the world, was like a mortal who had made a mistake. He showed a guilty expression and murmured, "I'm sorry." At that moment, his heart pounded, and a certain shadow suddenly appeared in the depths of his consciousness. To be continued. Chapter 416. I'm sorry. Being snubbed, Gu Yening rubbed her nose. Fine, you two are birds of the same feather. A good person like me can't understand your feelings. No, he might still have a way. Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes flickered. He then told Gu Yening earnestly, receiving that person's inheritance is your fortune, but don't forget who you are. If your heart is erased, you won't be able to go far. Gu Yening spoke with a serious expression. Thank you for the reminder. I will always remember these words. She suddenly thought of her eldest disciple. If she had accepted her suggestion and chosen that more comfortable path, she would still be a small foundation establishment cultivator right now, and might have died in some chaotic battle. Even if she survived, she would have been drifting along with the flow, and would never have been able to control her own fate. The sun rose, and the moon set. Time quickly passed. The hungry ghost's maw tore apart faster and faster, devouring living beings. Luo Ho Xiaoming suddenly opened his eyes. He looked towards the peak of the mountain. At some point, Li Qingshan arrived at the edge of the cliff, nodded slightly at Luo Ho Xiaoming, and looked into the distance, overlooking the mountains. Countless vines tried to entangle him, but this time he didn't use the power of vibration and let the vines pierce into his body. Gu Yening was surprised. What is he trying to do? Luo Ho Xiaoming smiled, probably to save the world. In the blink of an eye, Li Qingshan was drowned by the vines, and the thousands of vines twisted into a ball of vines, wrapping him tightly inside. Even with Li Qingshan's current cultivation level, he couldn't withstand this kind of extraction. His vitality was quickly drained, and his sturdy body shriveled up. His eyes were calm and peaceful, glowing with a faint green color as he silently operated the Qilin longevity strategy. In the small world in his body, a tender green grass suddenly grew on the vast land. It was so fragile, but it changed the whole small world in an instant, as if a puppet had gained life. Earth, fire, wind, water, and space were the basic elements that formed a world, but if there was no life, even if it was the 6 paths of reincarnation, the 3,000 worlds, or even the 9 heavens, it was meaningless to exist. It was because of the existence of these many lives that they were like clusters of sparks, illuminating the long night. The newborn Qilin transformation not only didn't affect the balance of the small world, but it also perfectly integrated into it, giving Li Qingshan new power. He waved his right hand lightly, and the vines scattered. Luo Ho Xiaoming was overjoyed. He succeeded. In fact, in such a short time, Li Qingshan didn't cultivate the first stage of the Qilin longevity strategy, but he had a trace of the Qilin's bloodline, which allowed him to communicate with all living beings and exert influence on them. In the past, none of the transformations had such an effect. When he cultivated the first stage of the ox demon transformation, it only strengthened his physique and increased his strength. Chapter 1347. Under the vast starry sky, the deep blue sky-devouring beast leaped out of the sea like a giant whale. It opened its abyss-like mouth and swallowed the entire Dragonhead Mountain, including Li Qingshan and the sky-climbing vine. Li Qingshan stepped on the sky-climbing vine and made it stretch out in the dark void, going deeper into the sky-devouring beast's body. After a while, he opened his eyes and said excitedly, "It's done." In a star billions of miles away, the god of the world, Li Qingshan's mirror avatar, clearly saw the sky-climbing vine piercing through the void and into this world. Everything was as he expected. His plan was actually very simple, which was to use the sky-climbing vine to connect the 9 provinces world and the small world, opening up a path of life. He was not sure if it would succeed because the sky-climbing vine could connect the 9 provinces world and the human realm, because the 6 paths of reincarnation and the 3,000 worlds had a natural connection. In the vast void, the 2 stars were separated by millions of miles, so no matter how strong the sky-climbing vine was, it would not be able to connect them together. The reason why it succeeded was because of the deep blue little fatty. In a sense, it was the clone of the small world, and the connection between the 2 was even closer than the 3,000 worlds and the 6 paths of reincarnation. After all, under normal circumstances, the 2 were still separated from each other. Everything that the deep blue little fatty devoured would be transmitted to the small world through a special organ in its body. It was actually still a whole body, just not like normal living beings. However, this kind of transmission had to go through a digestion process. Even the god of the world, Li Qingshan, could not even think about sending himself back, let alone other living beings. Once they entered its mouth, only death awaited them. Even a great cultivator could not withstand this kind of digestion. Now, Li Qingshan implanted the sky-climbing vine deep into the organ that Deep Blue Little Fatty used for transmission and successfully connected them. He could finally let go of all his worries and let the Deep Blue Little Fatty devour the 9 provinces world. This was also the only way to save the world. Li Qingshan flew out of the Deep Blue Little Fatty's body in high spirits. He did not look disappointed at all. Haha, I really am a genius. Great genius. What do you want to do? Do you need our help? Gu Yenying was also affected by his mood and felt inexplicably happy. She thought of the big monkey in the small world. Li Qingshan ordered without holding back. Yenying, go notify the cultivators who have undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation and above. Tell them to gather in the South Sea. Once I've devoured the 9 provinces, I'll send them to another world. The cultivation of the great cultivators and demon kings was too high for the current small world to accommodate. However, after Deep Blue Fatty had swallowed most of the 9 prefectures, it would definitely be able to hold it. A strange expression appeared on Gu Yenying's face. Why did his words sound so sinister? However, seeing that he was in high spirits, she didn't say anything else and immediately soared into the sky. Luo Hoshaoming smiled and said, "What about me?" Li Qingshan said, "Go to the South Sea and help me look after the place. There are many conflicts between these great cultivators, demon kings, and mutant kings. Great cultivators are also divided into the righteous path, the demonic path, and different sections. There were almost no demon kings of the same species, much less mutants. Don't think I'm not there yet. So they started fighting each other, and most of them died. My good intentions were wasted." He pondered and said, "Yeah, when we get to the small world, we can come up with a way to separate them. Humans belong to humans. Demons belong to demons. If the mutants want to be gods, let them be." Luo Hoshaoming said, "All right, I'll kill whoever makes a move." Li Qingshan sighed and said, "Now that I hear you say that, I really can't bear to do it. I'm a benevolent Qilin now. Have you heard of Qilins?" He then chuckled and said, "But it's a good idea." After Luo Hoshaoming left, Li Qingshan shouted, "Grow, grow, grow." Like an inflatable stick, Deep Blue Little Fatty swelled up until it reached a height of 30,000 meters, filling the space between heaven and earth. White clouds floated below it and could be seen clearly from 1,000 miles away. It opened its mouth as wide as it could, as if its body was about to be ripped apart, devouring everything: the earth, the magma, the air, the rivers, and even the entire space. It made Li Qingshan think of a game called Pac-Man from his past life. He could not help but laugh aloud. Eat, eat. Gluttons save the world. Deep Blue Little Fatty ate everything within 500 kilometers of Dragon's Head Mountain in a single gulp. Even the magma underground was swallowed clean. Afterwards, it headed straight south and arrived at the border between the Dragon Province and the Mist Province, snatching food from the Hungry Ghost Realm. The Hungry Ghost Realm did possess the ability to devour worlds, but it was not as simple and violent as the space-devouring beasts. Time passed quickly. In just over a month, Deep Blue Little Fatty had already devoured most of the 9 provinces, including trillions of lives. With a benevolent heart, Li Qingshan practiced the Qilin's method of longevity and pushed his Qilin bloodline to the limit. His eyes rippled with green light as he picked out all the lives in the world. Even the tiniest mayflies in the water were delivered into the miniature world through the heaven-climbing vine. The space-devouring beasts followed his will and selectively digested what they devoured. Li Qingshan discovered that the miniature world welcomed these lives very much. To the miniature world, as long as they were contained within it, they were a part of it. Living beings seemed to be extremely precious resources. Sometimes sending over a group of humans was even more beneficial to the will of the world than swallowing an entire mountain. If receiving the favor of the will of the world could be described as a child of destiny, then Li Qingshan could be described as the father of destiny of the miniature world right now. The spiritual qi of the miniature world was originally thin and narrow. It could not even accommodate cultivators who had undergone the first heavenly tribulation. Ever since Li Qingshan became a world god, the level of the miniature world could be said to have increased at an insane rate. Now, it was about to break through to the third heavenly tribulation. This speed was even faster than an ordinary person becoming a grand cultivator. It could be said that the miniature world was indebted to him for giving it a new lease on life. The constantly strengthening miniature worlds will practically loved and respected him as if he was its own father. It was completely like, do whatever you want, do whatever you want. He could control the miniature world's avatar, deep blue little fatty, as if it was his own arm. It was extremely smooth. This humongous creature that filled up the heavens and earth was even more obedient than a pet dog. In the process, he also met many familiar faces. In the desert east of the Red Prefecture, a man was swallowed into the body of a space-devouring beast along with a city wall. Li Qingshan vaguely felt that it was a little familiar. A sickly face appeared in his mind, and a name slipped out of his mouth. Huang Binggu. The current him no longer looked sickly, and his complexion was much better. It was just that his hair was white, and his face was full of wrinkles. He had already aged a little. He had actually broken through the first heavenly tribulation and become a foundation establishment cultivator. It was unknown what kind of fortuitous encounter he had encountered. He could not help but think of that life and death battle with the ginseng foragers many years ago. The hunters of Drawn Rain's village had rained down arrows, and Huang Binggu had stood high up on a rock, never missing his target. At that time, his life had been on the line, and he could not care about anything else. But now, he clearly remembered the lush forest around him, the bright sunlight above his head, and an old bull with a broken horn pulling the cart, creaking as it moved forward. Ha! Brother Bull even used his horn to stab someone to death at that time. That guy must have felt that he was extremely unlucky to actually die under the horn of an old bull, but he did not know that it was an honor. His memories gradually came back to him, and they were even more vivid than they were back then. Chapter 418, Vaguely Familiar Faces. It was filled with rising and falling mountains, rapids, and dangerous shoals, with patches of wasteland in between. With a wave of his hand, vegetation grew and rapidly spread. In the blink of an eye, the entire continent was covered in a lush green color, and it suddenly became full of life. With another wave of his hand, birds and beasts returned, eagles soared in the blue sky, and tigers returned to the mountains. Thousands of beasts ran freely without restraints. There were also countless monsters hiding in the mountains and swamps. He placed all the demonic beasts of the 9 states on this continent. In an instant, the entire continent seemed to be filled with demonic aura. This is what I have prepared for my fellow cultivators of the demon race. From now on, all creatures compete for freedom in the frosty sky. They no longer need to mix with humans, and they will not be harmed by hunters, fishermen, or cultivators. However, it is natural selection, and the strong preys on the weak. They will inevitably be eliminated by the laws of nature. Everyone was dumbstruck by this ability that seemed like the work of nature, and they instantly understood that he was a supreme god in this world. After coming to their senses, they all fell into deep thought. This was a rare opportunity to witness such a scene with their own eyes. If they could learn something from it, it would definitely be of great benefit to their cultivation. Luo Ho Xiaoming also passed through the sky climbing vine and came to this world. He had a different feeling in his heart. He, who had personally destroyed countless worlds, would naturally not be stunned by this scene. Instead, he suddenly understood Li Qingshan's plan. He exclaimed in his heart, "This is the way of the demonic beasts. I hope these arrangements will satisfy everyone." Suddenly, the world shook. In the boundless void, a star gave off an unprecedented light. The miniature world was advancing. He closed his eyes and sensed the world expand, as well as the changes in the laws of the world contained within. The sun rose and set. A long time passed, but it also felt like an instant. The third tribulation cultivators suddenly felt the invisible shackles disappearing. They felt an indescribable sense of freedom and carefreeness. They immediately understood that this world had accepted them. Their existence also accelerated the advancement of this world, because they were no longer foreign objects that needed to be rejected, but extremely precious resources. Each of them was an elite of the world's spirit energy, and this world's favor towards Li Qingshan had reached a new peak. With a single thought, he could turn mortals into the lucky ones favored by the heavens. He could also kill archfiend kings and great cultivators. It was truly divine grace, as vast as the ocean, divine might as deep as a prison. As long as he wanted to, he could enjoy all the pleasures that humans could imagine. A voice in his mind told him, "Stop, stay here, and enjoy everything. Comfort yourself. Don't pursue those meaningless things anymore. Otherwise, you'll end up empty-handed." However, he raised his head and cast his gaze towards the 9 heavens again. He understood many of the hidden meanings in Sumi Rao's words. It was easy to imagine how difficult and dangerous it must be to make the 9-tailed fox, who craves for the world to be in chaos, a void. Not to mention, the broken horn on Brother Nyo's head was constantly reminding him. Right now, he couldn't even imagine what kind of method it was. It could probably kill him with a single finger. The road ahead was long, and he had a slim chance of survival. But that was what his heart desired. Even if he died 9 times, he wouldn't regret it. "Brother Nyo, let me cut off that bastard's head to repay you." At this moment, the smile on his face was unbridled, breaking through all the shackles in his heart. To be continued. P.S. Great God, Hizu Gui, his heart is towards the 9 heavens. Comrades, give me a few more tickets, if you have any. Chapter 1351. Meanwhile, on the other side of the sky-climbing vine, on the back of the huge void-devouring beast, Li Qingshan's main body also revealed the same smile. Gu Yenying and Little N accompanied him, but their eyes were not looking at him. Su Minrao stood with her umbrella like a flower blooming in the void, even more dazzling than the stars. Without the restraints of the laws of heaven and earth, she was even more beautiful. He showed a disapproving expression towards their wariness. He thought, if I want to subdue this Li Qingshan, these two women really are the greatest problem. Interestingly, they have never truly conquered Li Qingshan. One became his follower, and the other became his collaborator. Even though they can influence many of his decisions, they are far from conquering him. A true conquest is to change a person's heart, not just their actions. At the very least, I will not be satisfied with such a meager harvest. Though Li Qingshan still hasn't even glanced at me right now. He's even acting like he's in heat. He must be dreaming. What a difficult person to deal with. But this is more interesting, isn't it? Li Qingshan lowered his head and said to Su Minrao, "Now we can talk." His mind had always been immersed in the mini-world, feeling the vastness of the world God, concentrating on creating his own world, almost unaffected by anything else. Now that he regained his senses, his eyes flashed with a dazzling light that lingered for a long time. However, he did not dislike this feeling. Instead, he recalled the words the most beautiful woman in the world. However, if one's willpower was not strong enough, one could not blame others for being charmed. After all, beauty itself was not sinful. Unknowingly, he had already forgiven Su Minrao for everything she had done. Instead, he could not help but think of all the good things she had done, and was inevitably affected by her charm. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After all, she was extremely talented and had persisted in cultivating for so many years. Was it for nothing? She could be easily ignored, and it was already not easy to maintain a trace of clarity. Thinking back, if Helicoverpa Rosa was not a seductive beauty, she would have already died under his fist. Back then, she really wanted to kill him. She was even more malicious than this nine-tailed fox queen. Therefore, it was hard to say what was considered as being charmed. It could only be said that one would inevitably be affected by external influences in life. As long as one didn't forget one's true self, it would be fine. This battle without the shadows of swords had just begun. Sumi Rao covered her mouth and chuckled. Her eyes were full of mystery. "Lang Chun, what do you want to talk about?" Li Qingshan said affectionately, "Of course it's our future." "What kind of future do you want?" "I can help you." "I want Poochie." Gu Yenying couldn't help but laugh. Then she sighed with her hand on her forehead. He really couldn't stand it anymore. Little and stared at Li Qingshan's face with her big, empty eyes. Li Qingshan felt some kind of invisible pressure. In the end, he couldn't say the word, you. He changed his words and said, "The way to defeat Xiongqi." Su Minrao raised her head proudly. "Humph, that's impossible." "Hey, didn't you say, hee, if you want to defeat Xiongqi, you'll have to cultivate for another 10,000 years. Su Minrao said with a disdainful expression, "Why did you suddenly throw a tantrum? You're so unreasonable." Li Qingshan shrugged. "I'm unreasonable? No, I'm not. You would have been squashed to death by Chuolong." Su Minrao even raised her hand and made a pinching gesture at Li Qingshan. How could Li Qingshan take this lying down? He sneered. "TCH, you have the nerve to mention it. That's because I'm wise and valiant. I broke through your lowly scheme and got rid of Chuolong. But I'm determined to fight them, no matter who they are. I hope you can stand on my side. But if you still treat this as a game, then I advise you to get out as soon as possible because you can't afford to play." "You?" Su Minrao glared at him. There was nothing more infuriating than the words "can't afford to play." But she had to admit that compared to Li Qingshan, she was indeed a bit can't afford to play. I know you want me to lower my head, but someone once told me not to lower my head to anyone because you can't reach the 9 heavens if you kneel. Do you want a piece of trash to play this deadly game with you? A moment later, Su Minrao sighed and spat out 2 words, "Return to ruins." To be continued. Who knew how many people had used the heaven climbing vine before, so there was already a complete defense system in place. Once the heaven climbing vine passed through the heavenly Tao, it would be discovered almost immediately. The heaven climbing vine would be killed immediately. What was even worse was that the celestial beings would wait for the rabbit to come, or directly follow the heaven climbing vine to ruthlessly punish those toads lusting after swan meat stowaways. Then all that's left is the Azura Tao, human Tao, and beast Tao. The Azura Tao is also excluded. Your mom isn't as law-abiding as Cheong Chi. Li Qingshan winked mischievously. Luo Ho Xiaoming smiled. And I can guarantee you that she's even harder to deal with than Cheong Chi. She definitely won't play this kind of game with you. Li Qingshan shrugged. With the battle prowess of an Azura god, there probably weren't many in the 6 paths of reincarnation who could match up to him. Then there are only 2 choices left. For the sake of fairness, let's vote. Those who choose the beast Tao, raise your right hand, and those who choose the human Tao, raise your left. Li Qingshan raised his right hand without hesitation. He had already smelled the wild aura of the beast Tao, so he chose the beast Tao wholeheartedly. He looked at Luo Ho Xiaoming and revealed a treacherous smile. He had played a trick here. After all, Luo Ho Xiaoming didn't have the bloodline of a demon, so he would most likely choose the human Tao. But Gu Yenying, who pursued freedom and obtained the Kuan Peng's inheritance, would definitely choose the human Tao like him. Needless to say, little, and would definitely follow him. His fake democracy wasn't just to shut Luo Ho Xiaoming's mouth, it was also to bully him. It was definitely a bad taste. Are you a kid? Luo Ho Xiaoming raised his left hand in annoyance. I choose the human Tao. Li Qingshan laughed proudly. I knew it. Gu Yenying smiled and also raised her left hand. I also choose the human Tao. Li Qingshan was shocked. Why? Because I'm not sure if I will become the prey. The beast Tao was free, but it also followed the laws of nature, so it had a cruel side. Li Qingshan advised, don't be too timid. With your speed, who can hunt you? It's better to nip it in the bud. Gu Yenying looked confident. She was obviously not a woman who would be easily persuaded. All right, I give up, but it doesn't matter. It's just a draw. Li Qingshan believed that he would get what he wanted in the end. Who said it's a draw? Luo Ho Xiaoming glanced at Little and smiled. Li Qingshan said seriously, Little, and you raised the wrong hand. Little and also looked at his white left hand seriously. I didn't. Li Qingshan was stunned. He opened his mouth and roared into the sky, his voice shaking thousands of miles. Ah! Countless cultivators looked over, not knowing what happened. Luo Ho Xiaoming and the other 2 looked at each other and smiled without saying a word. Li Qingshan pointed at them in disbelief. You guys teamed up to bully me, even Little, and you? Luo Ho Xiaoming smiled and repeated his words. For the sake of fairness, Gu Yenying patted his shoulder. All right, you are just attracted by the wild aura of the beast Tao. Whether it is to speed up our cultivation or to find the way to the ultimate, we need help and guidance. The human Tao is the best choice. My cultivation in the beast Tao will be faster. Li Qingshan insisted. He could deeply feel the beast Tao calling him. When I get there, I will definitely become the child of destiny. I will be able to protect you guys. Little and said softly, Qingshan, this is the problem. When you become the child of destiny, the human part of you will be suppressed or even killed. In the long run, this may not be beneficial to your cultivation. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, That's right. The biggest advantage of the human Tao is to uphold humanity. There is no such thing as the child of destiny. Do you really want to have a voice above your head telling you what you should and shouldn't do? He paused for a moment. Moreover, you might even be able to inherit a huge amount of wealth from Chuolong. Then he changed the topic and said, "But I don't think this matter is that valuable to the immortals. Chuolong has already done things to this extent. He can obviously take the whole world for himself. So why would he find an old man to take away most of the results? If he really had a powerful backer behind him, he would have definitely asked for help from the human realm through the heaven-climbing vine on Dragonhead Mountain. However, he didn't do so. So, according to my deductions, this matter should have been done by him alone. However, it's also possible that he informed some people. So if Chuolong dies, the life lamp in the sect will be extinguished, so this matter must not be done. A dignified human emperor, no matter where he is not a small figure. But since he is still alive, we can give it a try." Li Qingshan's eyes became brighter and brighter as he listened. If Luo Ho Xiaoming's deduction was correct, then once they entered the human realm, they would be able to get a cave abode for free. That was the cave abode of a human emperor who had gone through 5 heavenly tribulations. Just the benefits of cultivation alone might not be enough to go down to the demonic beast path to become the child of destiny. Perhaps there would be some miraculous pills, sex pants, and AI treasures. These things were what humans were best at. No race was better at using external objects than them. Even if they were not favored by the heavenly mandate, they could still make everything in the world work for them. His gaze swept across the faces of the 3 people. "You have already considered these things. It was said that the truth was in the hands of a few people. Then the worst thing was to not have the truth and still be in the minority. But a good teammate was better than a useless teammate." Gu Yening smiled. "These days, you have been thinking about how to create a world. How can you have the time to think about these small things?" Little and said concisely, "This world is very important." Of course, Li Qingshan racked his brains, not just to save the world or to play a game of world creation. Now, he had already ordered Deep Blue Little Fatty to fly to the nearest star to the 9 states. As long as it continued to devour, the growth of the 5 continents world would be limitless. One day, it would definitely become his most important trump card. In order to realize this grand strategy, the 5 continents world must be as perfect as possible. That way, the living beings from all over the world could thrive and flourish. We're on the same side, just a different division of labor. But even after saying so much, the risk still exists. You decide whether to take the gamble or not. Luo Ho Xiaoming smiled. He already knew the result. A Li Qingshan who was afraid of taking risks was not the real Li Qingshan. "Of course, I'm taking the gamble. Riches come from danger." Li Qingshan waved his hand heroically, then said mysteriously, "Also, I have a sure win method." Chapter 1355. I will provide you with high speed in 1 second. Everyone's expression changed when they heard this. For cultivators, this was the equivalent of cutting off their path and losing the possibility of immortality. If it was anyone else, they would have been treated as an ignorant lunatic and would not have taken it to heart. However, Li Qingshan truly had the ability to cut off everyone's path to ascension. There was a deathly silence. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. He had thought that someone would question him or even refute him. He did not expect everyone to be so calm. He continued, "As for the reason behind this, I believe I do not need to explain. This matter concerns my family's life and does not allow for the slightest bit of luck. However, since I dared to tell everyone openly and not play tricks in the dark, you should believe that I have no ill intentions. He tried his best to appear approachable, but the cultivators only felt a chill down their spines. The ascension heavenly tribulation was already extremely difficult to pass. If another world god were to stab him in the back, he would definitely die. However, it was just as he had said. If he did not say it clearly, this matter could definitely be concealed for hundreds of years. There were very few cultivators who had the qualifications to undergo the ascension heavenly tribulation. It was only natural that they would fail the heavenly tribulation. Qian Lingji smiled wryly. I believe that you have no ill intentions, but could you at least give us some leeway? Don't cut off our path so quickly. Li Qingshan smiled. There's always a way out. I still have many things I need to rely on you for in the future. So how can I cut off your path of cultivation? You should already know just how narrow this world was in the beginning. Even cultivators and demons basically didn't exist here, yet it can accommodate you all founding sects and founding your own countries now. Qian Lingji's eyes brightened. You mean this world can become even bigger? Of course. The ascension, heavenly tribulation, is extremely dangerous. Moreover, we do not know what will happen after entering the 6 paths of reincarnation. It is better to grow together with the 5 continents. Our sects will prosper, and our lands will be secure forever. Wouldn't that be great? Qian Lingji weighed the pros and cons and sighed. If that is the case, it is not a bad thing. All right. I am willing to support you. He would definitely not oppose Li Qingshan in front of so many people. That would only harm the friendship that he had built up with great difficulty. Even if he had to ascend, it was better to talk about it in private. If the discussion went smoothly, it would be beneficial to both of them. Perhaps they could even receive his help, greatly reducing the danger of their ascension. Big old father, I support you too. The Meat King naturally supported the Great Fiend King unconditionally, and the Great Fiend King never let him down. Gong Yuan glared at Li Qingshan and thought to herself, if I really ascend, are you really going to kill me? However, she had just unified the mermaid race and had not had enough fun being the mermaid queen. He was not in a hurry to ascend. With the two of them agreeing, the mutant kings naturally had no objections. The demon race was known for their long lifespans and accumulation, so no one jumped out to contend against Li Qingshan. However, their attitudes were not as gentle, and many of them had arrogant looks on their faces. Li Qingshan nodded slightly. If that's the case, I'll take it that everyone agrees with me. You can continue to celebrate. He was very satisfied. As the god of the world, he did not want any cultivators to leave this world, because every cultivator who ascended was the essence of a world. It could be said that they were flesh that fell from their mother's body and would accelerate the decline of the world. That was why the heavenly tribulation of ascension was so difficult, because the will of the world instinctively wanted to keep this resource in its body. His decision was also absolutely approved by the will of the world. Li Qingshan did not stay for long. Before leaving, he left behind a meaningful sentence. If someone forcefully goes through the heavenly tribulation of ascension, don't say that you did not warn me. His voice echoed, and Li Qingshan's figure became faint, perhaps because of the dignity of the god. These 4 short words caused all the great cultivators and great fiend kings to shiver, leaving an unusually deep impression. Later on, it became popular and became a resounding deterrent. When local sects negotiated, they would most likely use this sentence when the negotiations failed. In the vast ocean, on a barren, lone island, a majestic altar basically occupied the entire island. It was extremely similar to the heaven's altar on Dragon's Head Mountain, except it lacked a heaven-climbing vine. Li Qingshan and Luo Xiaoming and Gu Yening reunited here once again. During this time, Li Qingshan visited many old friends and provided them with as much assistance as he could, settling his past grievances. For example, he gave the unraging monk a great Buddha mountain, he gave Qianlingji a capital city, he gave Huang Binggu and Yu Shuquang 2 pills that could increase their lifespans, and so on. Then there were the women and children. Needless to say, they were sentimental, but they were not as unreasonable as mortals. Apart from Qiu Haitang, who was a weirdo, they were all cultivators with their own goals. Men were not everything in their lives. However, he was much more crude towards the children. He implemented an absolute free-range policy. I don't care what you want to do. You can bear the consequences yourself. Don't expect me to clean up after you. Now that he mentioned it, he had already become a grandfather. He would probably become a great-grandfather in a few more years. Gu Yenying smiled and wished him many children and grandchildren. Li Qingshan stared at her belly until she knocked him over the head with a fan. With the full support of a god of the world, Li Qingshan, her cultivation had advanced drastically during this time. She had already reached the peak of the third heavenly tribulation. Luo Xiaoming was the same. When Li Qingshan ordered the deep blue fatty to devour the 9 provinces, he had plundered quite a lot of the Azura field, tossing it all to him, and went without saying she had reached the peak of the third heavenly tribulation a long time ago. If she had not waited for Li Qingshan, she would have undergone the heavenly tribulation of ascension in the 9 provinces already. During this time, she had remained on the northern ice continent the entire time. Chapter 1356. Li Qingshan pursed his lips and had a determined look in his eyes. He quickly traveled through the winding and deep tunnel, heading towards a brand new world that he had never been to before. Suddenly, there was a flash of light at the end of the tunnel. He smiled and sped up. His heart was filled with anticipation. The place where the light was shining was the human realm. What was waiting for him there? However, at this moment, his body suddenly collapsed like a broken bubble. It was still colorful a moment ago, but in the next moment, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had never existed. 5 continents, world, isolated island on the sea. A pair of crimson eyes slowly opened and reflected the figures of Little and Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming. Gu Yenying asked concernedly, "How is it?" Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "Just by looking at your expression, you know that you failed." Li Qingshan scratched his head. "My clone suddenly shattered. Could it be a trap set by the Huilong? But I haven't even used the sky climbing vine." So his so-called sure win method was to send his mirror clone up to check. Then, no matter what kind of trap there was, he wouldn't have to worry. At most, he would just cut off the sky climbing vine. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "It wasn't the Huilong's trap. It was the human realm's laws of heaven and earth that disintegrated your clone." Disintegrated? Little and tilted his head and looked over. Luo Ho Xiaoming nodded. Yes, his mirror clone originated from his innate divine ability. In essence, it is a kind of spell. You can use this spell here, but it doesn't mean you can use it in the human realm. Li Qingshan rubbed his chin and revealed a pondering expression. All divine abilities and spells exist based on the laws of heaven and earth. When I first landed in the small world, I also encountered a similar problem. All divine abilities and spells couldn't be used, but that was because they were restricted by the laws of heaven and earth. In other words, entering a higher world from a lower world would also be severely restricted. Luo Ho Xiaoming smiled and said, "It can't be said to be a restriction, but a restriction. The waves in the sea are naturally bigger than those in the pond. Once you experience it yourself, you will naturally understand." That makes sense. Li Qingshan left behind a mirror image clone on the spot and entered the sky-climbing vine again. He followed the deep and winding tunnel and went straight to the human realm. Since there was no sure win method, it did not matter. It was nothing more than a gamble. The main body was much faster than the clone. In the blink of an eye, the bright light once again shone in front of them. A moment ago, the feeling of his mirror image avatar collapsing reverberated in his heart, causing him to be slightly nervous, but he didn't hesitate in the slightest and plunged into the bright light. Suddenly, he understood that the bright light was the light emitted by the extremely pure and dense spiritual chi. He had never felt such pure spirit chi in his life. Even if he directly absorbed it from spirit stones and spirit veins, it would not reach such a shocking level. Every breath he took was like swallowing a spirit stone, almost giving him the illusion of indigestion. The spiritual light was even more dazzling than the midsummer sun. But after he crossed a certain boundary, he began to restrain himself. He could feel the hardness and smoothness of the stone beneath his feet. The light that filled his eyes had yet to dissipate. He didn't even have time to carefully explore the environment he was in. In an instant, an indescribable feeling spread throughout his body. It was as if there were millions of thin lines that were hard to see with the naked eye, penetrating every pore and inch of his body, causing him to be unable to move for a while. Unknowingly, he had already passed through the sky-climbing vine. It was more like a normal person suddenly experiencing gravity that was several times stronger than normal, causing his entire blood circulation to be affected. Of course, he was not a normal person, but a cultivator with great power. His life would not be in danger. As long as he had enough time, he would be able to adapt to this new environment. However, he did not even have a minute. Under the pressure of the golden blade, he seemed to see the golden eyes of the Hui dragon again. He suddenly understood that this was the true Dragon Emperor's sword. Perhaps it was because of the laws of the world that he was not brought down by the Hui dragon. He stayed in this cavern to watch over the stowaways who entered without his permission. There was no time to ponder any further. With a clang, the ending flower blade spun and flew out, the crack on the blade widening. The golden sword light whistled down. Li Qingshan tilted his head slightly. The blade cut down from the right side of his neck, tearing apart his flesh and splitting his bones. It went all the way to his lower abdomen and was about to cut Li Qingshan in half. At this time, a pair of firm and powerful hands tightly gripped the hilt. Chapter 1358. There are no mountains of blades, seas of fire, frost, wind, or thunder. Everything is no different from when he was on the altar. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh in relief. Although the spirit turtle had recovered its ability to foresee, it was restricted by the laws of the world. Fate became even more unpredictable, no longer as clear and sharp as when it was in the lower world. However, he believed that if there was any life-threatening danger, it would still sense it. After all, he was not facing a living opponent right now. Even without special methods, the complicated and ever-changing human mind would naturally confuse the heavenly secrets. The higher one's cultivation, the greater the confusion. Instead, it was a formation without its own consciousness. Everything that happened afterwards was smoother than he had imagined. Li Qingshan relaxed very quickly. He began to wander around the dwelling as if he was sightseeing. The two words "dragon pool" hung above the main entrance, which should be the name of the dwelling. If Chuo Long was still here, it would live up to its name. But now, I can only change it to Tiger's Lair. The entire dragon pool dwelling was built from a mountain. Due to the misconception the palace-like hall gave him, it was not as large as he had imagined. At the very least, it was far smaller than Dragonhead Mountain. However, every inch of space was meticulously carved, extremely luxurious and elegant. There was a main hall, a side hall, a study, a tea room, a side room, a garden. The most valuable building was actually the garden. Not only were there many exotic flowers and herbs, there was also a spiritual spring. Leaning over to drink a few mouthfuls, the spiritual qi was so thick that it made Li Qingshan feel like he was drunk. The exotic flowers and herbs gave off a strange fragrance, causing the qilin to become restless. The qilin's guide of longevity circulated even faster. He was about to master the first layer. However, apart from the true Dragon Emperor's sword, he did not find any other decent talismans, causing Li Qingshan to curse the Chuolong for being a pauper. However, on the desk in the study, he found a box of bookmarks. Some were carved from jade, some were made from silver, some were cast from copper, and some were carved from wood. All of them were antique, exquisite, and elegant. They contained a strange spiritual energy, but no matter how he looked at them, they didn't look like magic treasures that could kill or defend against enemies. He casually stowed them away in his Sumeru ring. Right, ever since he entered the human realm, even the space in the Sumeru ring had shrunk greatly. There was less than 1/10 of it left. Fortunately, there wasn't anything inside. Otherwise, there might be the danger of it exploding. There was no need to mention anything else. Just using this place as a cultivation cave had endless benefits. He could even try to push his cultivation to the 5th heavenly tribulation step by step. However, he did not dare to forget one thing. After entering the human realm, his 500-year promise with Qiongqi had shrunk greatly. If he couldn't find a way to deal with it, it would be meaningless even if he survived 5 heavenly tribulations. He had to find a way to enter the sinkhole. However, after patrolling for a while, he didn't find what he wanted to find the most, which was the eye of the entire formation. If he couldn't find the eye of the formation, he wouldn't be able to control the entire protective formation, and this dragon pool, Immortal's Cave, wouldn't belong to him anymore. If he broke the formation by force, the formation would have counterattacked. Perhaps it had attracted the attention of others because of this dragon pool cave abode. It was of Li, he, and or of never, he, or he, Li, he did not. He, of, and Li Qingshan had never studied the way of formations, so he had never broken through the formation with force. It was the derivation of the spirit turtle. Now that he could not use force, he could not derive anything either. What a headache! Then he remembered what the Chua dragon had said. He had a flash of inspiration and came to a realization. The Chua dragon had once said that he wanted to refine the world of the 9 provinces into a dwelling. In that case, it was impossible to simply use the heaven climbing vine to connect the world of the 9 provinces with the dragon pool's dwelling. There had to be some way to combine the two, turning the world of the 9 provinces into a part of the dragon pool's dwelling. As a result, Li Qingshan returned to where he started and studied the tall altar. It was gray, like it was carved from regular rock. However, when he touched it, it felt extremely sturdy and delicate, like some kind of jade. Originally, he thought the altar was only used to locate the heaven climbing vine. From the looks of it, it was not that simple. His gaze landed on the pillar that led straight to the main hall. Without the golden dragon formed by the true Dragon Emperor's sword, it seemed even more ordinary. However, standing at the center of the altar was not just for decoration. Perhaps the golden dragon was not just there to kill the stowaways. It was also there to protect them. Thinking up to there, Li Qingshan ascended the altar again and arrived before the pillar. He extended his hand in an attempt to touch it. The spirit turtle suddenly gave him a strong warning, warning him that it was very likely for him to pay the price with his life. Li Qingshan was overjoyed instead of alarmed. The pillar was definitely the crucial point of the entire formation. Once someone attempted to destroy or refine it, they would immediately trigger the attack of the entire formation. Obviously, their lives would be in danger. As a result, he pulled his hand back and waited for the arrival of Little and the others. If he wanted to refine the formation, he needed someone to watch over it. In just a short while, the sun rose and set in the world of the 5 provinces. Time passed by extremely quickly, which made him feel a sense of urgency. Time waited for no man. Very soon, the 3 of them arrived. They sensed the pure spiritual qi, and their expressions varied. Little and closed her eyes and sensed it. Although she did not rely on spiritual qi to cultivate, she had to cultivate in a world like this if she wanted to cultivate the path of white bone and great beauty to an even higher level. Gu Yenying smiled from ear to ear, unable to disguise her joy at all. Luo Ho Xiaoming, on the other hand, felt rather emotional. In such a short amount of time, he had actually returned to the 6 realms of Sasra from a miniature world with thin spiritual qi. Although it could not compare to the Azura realm, it was still a world of the same level after all. His cultivation would recover at an even faster rate. This was all thanks to Li Qingshan. Once the 3 of them had grown accustomed to the laws of the world in the mortal realm, Little and set up the blood sea banner, and a river of blood surged out, wrapping around the altar. Then she cast down the skeleton demon formation, forming a powerful defensive formation. Luo Ho Xiaoming stood behind Li Qingshan, preparing to make up for Little, and Gu Yenying unfurled her wings as a final insurance. She was prepared to flee back to the world of the 5 provinces with them if the refinement failed. When everything was ready, Li Qingshan's eyes turned a deep blue, as tranquil and silent as the deep sea. He placed his hand on the Hua Biao gently. In that instant, a fierce gale surged, kicking up waves of blood. Rolling, dark clouds surrounded them from all directions, filled with lightning and thunder. It was deafening. Li Qingshan turned a deaf ear to it. He used the spirit turtle transformation to deduce the formation with all his might. With a hum, torrential rain shot out from the dark clouds like arrows. Bolt after bolt of lightning struck down like heavy hammers. The river of blood surged, blocking the torrential rain. However, a gap was blasted open by the lightning, allowing the torrential rain to pour in. Luo Ho Xiaoming, who had been standing motionless, suddenly let out a roar and moved. He transformed into a blurry humanoid figure and flew around Hua Biao. His fists, legs, elbows, knees, head, every part of his body was a weapon, shattering the rainstorm and the lightning. Yet, in a single moment, the blood sea banner was riddled with holes. Over a dozen skull prayer beads were shattered, and the entire skeleton demon formation fell by a level. Blood oozed from the corner of Luo Ho Xiaoming's mouth. He called out, "We can't hold on for much longer. Yenying, get ready." Even if they all possessed superhuman bloodlines and legacies, it was impossible for them to contend against the protective formation of the human emperor's dwelling. At most, they could only buy some time for Li Qingshan. If they could not refine the formation in time, then they could only retreat. Yes, Gu Yenying suddenly noticed. The raindrops left some dents on the sacrificial altar. If we retreat this time, the sacrificial altar will be destroyed. Luo Ho Xiaoming frowned. It's not just the sacrificial altar. The crucial points of the formation will be destroyed as well, so we won't be able to refine this formation anymore. The heaven-climbing vine won't be able to stab into the dwelling either. This is probably the insurance that Hui Long left behind. In reality, Hui Long had not thought of this at all. It was already inconceivable enough that a third heavenly tribulation cultivator could withstand the surprise attack of the true Dragon Emperor's sword, let alone this traversing clouds and summoning rain formation. Just that gust of wind was enough to destroy the soul and destroy the bones. And once the protective formation was activated, it would not care about any losses at all. It would only destroy the intruder at all costs. Even the crucial points of the formation would be destroyed. It would not give the enemy a chance to refine it. This formation had its own protective mechanism. Little and said calmly, 10 breaths left. 7. The torrential rain poured down, washing away the blood river. 4. Lightning raged, ripping open the skeletons. 1. Tens of thousands of raindrops, and a chain of lightning pounced towards the 4 from all directions. Gu Yenying grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder. She was about to retreat into the heaven-climbing vine. Li Qingshan yelled, "Clouds and rain scatter." In that instant, the dark clouds, torrential rain, and lightning all disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never existed. Chapter 1359. A burst of wild laughter rang out. Li Qingshan slapped his thigh and said, "I knew you guys have no taste, so I purposely tested you by building a cave. Ha ha ha. The corner of Luo Ho Xiaoming's I twitched. I really want to beat him up." Gu Yenying rolled her eyes. "Unfortunately, you can't beat him." Little and lowered her head. "I'm not happy. Greater than over equal to for all, greater than over equal to for all." Li Qingshan rubbed her head. "My Shaolin is obviously an exception, but if it's the dragon pool dwelling, then so be it. This is indeed not a place to stay for long. It's hard to say when we will have guests. I will find a new cave as soon as possible, so you guys can cultivate here. However, don't try to pass the tribulation for now. I'm afraid it will attract some people's attention." Little and said, "Qingshan, you idiot, I don't need you to tell me. You are so long-winded." Li Qingshan's smile froze, while Little and laughed. Gu Yenying smiled. "The new cave can't be too bad. Don't worry, it will be better than this." Li Qingshan rubbed Little N's cheeks hard, waved his hand, and walked towards the entrance of the cave. With a loud bang, the stone door opened. Bright and beautiful sunlight poured in and engulfed his figure. The sun was like fire. It was midsummer, and the rolling mountains were verdant. The green was so thick that it seemed like it was going to drip down from the mountains. As the mountain breeze blew, the smell of grass and trees rushed over, mixed with the chirping of birds. It was a scene full of vitality. However, there was nothing special about it. If it were not for the unusual density of the spiritual qi, he would have suspected that he had returned to the 9 provinces, standing on crouching Ox Hill and looking at the boundless mountains. He had officially stepped into the 6 paths of reincarnation, and it was like he had experienced reincarnation. However, when he looked back, there were no small villages. There were only lonely mountains, and the mountains were like dragons. Li Qingshan randomly picked up a stone and crushed it, feeling the change in his power. "It's almost like I've fallen by a major realm. Maybe it's more than that. If I transform into a fiend god, I probably won't even reach 100 feet. This is a great thing for cultivation. How interesting. And just as I expected, the laws of heaven and earth had a restraining effect. Otherwise, in such an environment with rich spiritual qi, even if birds and beasts couldn't become monsters, their lifespans would be greatly extended. Once they had a longer lifespan, the possibility of them becoming monsters would increase greatly. As the most intelligent of all creatures, humans were probably all born with innate spiritual bodies and had the potential to become cultivators. If that's the case, I'm afraid this place can no longer be called the mortal realm. Other than the Dragon Pool immortal cave behind him, there was no one else in the surroundings. This was to be expected. Even mortals would look for a beautiful place to build a villa after they became rich. Cultivators would choose a blessed place where spirit veins gathered to build their immortal's cave. It was even more impossible for them to gather together. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to walk out from the front door so casually. However, this did not mean that it was safe. This dragon pool cave dwelling was definitely within the sphere of influence of the Myriad Manifestation sect. With the flying speed of cultivators, there would be people who would come looking for the Hui dragon at any time. They would definitely come knocking on his door. With their current strength, they could not even defeat a human sovereign realm cultivator. Moreover, the strongest cultivator of the Myriad Manifestation sect was definitely not just a human sovereign realm cultivator. Even if all this did not happen, cultivation required calmness and concentration. How could they be uneasy all the time? They even had to be careful when going through the heavenly tribulation. Thus, they had to find a new immortal's cave dwelling as their base. However, he had just arrived in the human world. He was unfamiliar with the place and did not know where to find out information. Just as he was about to randomly choose a direction, he suddenly sniffed and reached out his hand to grab a gust of mountain wind. He placed it on the tip of his nose and sniffed it hard. Human smell. He laughed. Like a demon that was about to choose a person to devour, he leaped and fell straight down the cliff. The mountain wind whistled past his ears. A blue wave blew against his face. With a plop, the blue wave shattered and fell into the deep pool. After sinking for more than 100 feet, he still could not see the bottom. Perhaps this was the origin of the name Dragon Pool. Sunlight shone through the water surface and rippled. He raised his head and gazed at this scene. After thinking for a while, he swam upstream. When he walked out of the pool, water droplets rolled down. His red hair and red eyes had already turned into black hair and black eyes, fusing the appearance of his demon form and his original human form. He was still extraordinarily handsome, but he was no longer a naked demon. In the human world, he obviously had to act like a human. However, even though he had concealed his demon chi, he still could not hide the wild and violent nature of a demon king. Even though he was a human, he cultivated a brutal and overbearing cultivation method, like the Extreme Emperor's record of world destruction. He was just short of carving the word bad guy on his forehead. He was truly unsuitable for gathering information. He waved his hand, and the deep pool fell silent. The blue waves were like a mirror. He squatted down and looked at it. He could not help but frown. Immediately, his killing intent surged like a tiger crouching, terrifying people. The tiger demon is too fierce. The phoenix is too proud. The spirit turtle is too cold. And the ape demon is basically a joke. He probably can't help but look for some fun, or, in other words, trouble. The ox demon isn't bad. He's rather simple and honest, but it's a pity that he's a little unreasonable. He muttered to himself as he made various expressions. Some were reserved, some were indifferent, like he was changing his face. Every single expression was vastly different, basically like he was a different person. This was the special characteristics of the various demonic transformations. Not only would it affect his expression and bearing, but it would even affect his way of doing things from the inside out, as well as his future cultivation. An expression flashed across his face, and his eyes lit up. He slapped his right cheek 3 times, switched his expression 3 times, and then patted his left cheek gently. Finally, he managed to capture the expression that flashed by, and he smiled in satisfaction. In the water mirror, his face was peaceful, filled with love for all life in the world from the bottom of his heart. He could not even bear to harm a blade of grass or an ant. In particular, his eyes seemed to be emerald green. They were like willow branches swaying in the spring breeze, gentle and lively, yet also like the seawater under the summer sun. They were filled with a pleasant liveliness. As a matter of fact, he even seemed rather innocent. When he smiled, he was like a young man. This was the benevolence that existed in the depths of his heart, and the Chilean transformation made it even clearer. He touched his face and smiled. All right, this is it. With just this face, I'll twist off the head of anyone who dares to say, I'm not a good person. I happen to be cultivating the Chilean's Guide of Longevity as well, so I'll be getting the best of both worlds. He turned around and entered the forest, rushing off in the direction of the smell of humans. Traversing over mountains and ridges, Li Qingshan traveled for over 50 kilometers. Suddenly, a gust of foul air assaulted him. With a roar, a brightly colored tiger with a white forehead and drooping eyes leapt out of the forest. It was twice the size of a regular tiger, almost becoming a demon. It stared at Li Qingshan covetously, blocking his path. Li Qingshan concealed all of his aura, so he seemed more like a mortal. When he saw the tiger blocking his path, he was in no hurry to advance. He stopped and looked at the tiger with a smile. The tiger looked at him suspiciously and approached him step by step. Suddenly, it met his eyes and lowered its head. It slowly retreated and made way for him like a loyal general facing a benevolent king. Li Qingshan's smile became wider. Good cat, you're indeed from my family. In the future, eat more vegetables and less meat. I hope you'll become a demon soon. The tiger let out a cry as if it was responding to him. It turned around and leapt into the forest. Haha, this is a good move. In the future, I'll have to convince people with virtue. Li Qingshan continued forward and passed through the dense forest. As he got closer to the smell of humans, he felt a little excited. He couldn't help but slow down. This was someone from the Tao of the human realm. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and felt a little strange. There were many people around, but why were they all hiding behind the trees? There was also a faint smell of blood. With a swoosh, a cold light flashed in front of him. A strong man leapt out from behind the tree. His face was fierce, and his upper body was bare. His muscles were bulging. Hey, kid, this road is opened by me, and this tree is planted by me. If you want to pass through here, leave the toll. Li Qingshan was stunned. He had a strange feeling and thought in disbelief, I'm being robbed. The strong man put down the big knife in his hand and laughed. This kid is scared silly. Brothers, come out. More than 10 bandits walked out of the forest and looked at Li Qingshan as if they were looking at a cow or a sheep. They talked all at once. This kid is empty-handed. He doesn't look like a merchant, nor does he look like a passerby. I wonder where he came from. Maybe he's also an idiot looking for immortality. Ha! There are so many idiots like him recently. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself to see if you're worthy? If that's true, then we can have a big meal again. But he looks like a poor guy. His looks are not bad. Maybe we can sell him for a good price. It's better to eat. Li Qingshan came back to his senses. He immediately wanted to turn hostile and kill them. But then he remembered that he had just confirmed the rules of conduct in the human world. Moreover, this was the first group of people he had met in the human world. Even if it was just for cultivation, it was not good to change his course immediately. Forget it, you guys are lucky. Heaven has the virtue of cherishing life. I'm now using virtue to win people over. Using virtue to win people over. While repeating the words, using virtue to win people over, he stared deeply at the leader of the bandits and said with a smile, My friend, please do me a favor. The bandit leader stood there in a daze, as if he was also stunned by the strange charm of those eyes. Li Qingshan smiled and was about to go around him. The bandit leader suddenly became furious. He put his knife on Li Qingshan's neck and said, "You're quite brave. You dare to call me brother. Now kneel down and kowtow 3 times. Call me grandpa 3 times. I'll do you a favor." The Qilin was the king of all beasts. Even if there was only a trace of its aura, it could make a tiger retreat. Even if humans were infected by the Qilin's aura, they would not easily change their minds. After all, the Qilin did not have the charm of the 9-tailed fox. Li Qingshan was silent for a moment. Then he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. "Damn it, the human world is really too unfriendly." The group of bandits made an unbridled noise. "You're really an idiot. Don't you see what grandpas do? Do you think you can get away with a few words? Everyone here is your grandpa. You have to kowtow 3 times and call me grandpa 3 times. The one in front of you is the big grandpa, and I'm your second grandpa." The bandit leader grinned and said, "If you dare to say no, I'll immediately dig out your heart and liver to go with wine." Good idea that you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.